The first thing you smell isn't salt, it's decay cloaked in brine. The dockboards flex under your weight, as if the island itself is warning you off. You stand with your case in your hand, and the year in your mouth 1892, and already it tastes like iron. The jungle hums. The tide works the pilings with the patience of a gravedigger. Somewhere back across the channel, Trinidad is busy with markets and bells. Here, Shaka Chakare breathes slow, like a body saving its strength. You walk. Coral dust sifts into your shoes. There's a rosary, half buried by the path, a child's comb missing teeth, a shoe with its tongue torn out, a trail of small abandonments that says more than any official letter. They called this an assignment, as if duty could be packed in a trunk and ferried across bright water. The hospital shows itself in pieces, the pale skin of French brick, lashes of shutters, a mouth of a door that won't quite close. The smell changes as you cross the threshold, sweetish, metallic, like fruit left too long in the sun and meat forgotten altogether. You know the scent, they taught you the words. Hansen's disease, if you prefer a gentleman's euphemism. Leprosy, when people stop pretending. A breeze rolls through the corridor, hardly moving the gauze tied to bed frames like prayer flags. Someone coughs a dry, papery cough. Someone laughs without humor. You set your case down and tell yourself you will not flinch. Tell me where you're listening from, and what hour has you by the collar. If you make it to the end of this, we'll both know you're stubborn enough to keep going. Like, comment, subscribe, not out of habit, but so this place isn't forgotten by morning. You meet the new one at the jetty, barely more than a girl under the brim of a borrowed hat. Knuckles white around a suitcase with one good hinge. She waves before realizing no one waves here. You raise a hand anyway. A gesture is a bridge. Sometimes you build it and walk it alone. You'll want to keep the hat, you say. Not for the sun, for the flies. Her smile falters a degree. She tells you her name, tells you she felt called. You nod, because arguing with a calling is like arguing with rain. It falls when it wants. She follows you uphill as the path curls through brush that always smells faintly of damp rope and old smoke. You slow your pace so she won't stumble. She stumbles anyway. The suitcase thumps a rhythm like a stubborn heart. You show her the ward. Beds turned to hammocks, turned to pallets, whatever wooden cloth could be persuaded into shape. She stares at the first man, who's reading a prayer card with eyes too numb to blink. Hyperpigmented patches near his temples blend into a landscape of altered sensation. Nerves thickened like cords beneath skin. You watch her throat move when she swallows. Good, still human. We don't say leper, you remind her quietly. We say patient. We say name. He has one, he tells it to her, in a voice softened by time and chronic inflammation, the tail ends of words losing themselves in nasal resonance. He lets her look at his hands. She pretends not to notice the resorption at the distal phalanges, the way digits taper, not because they were eaten, but because long-time neuropathy and secondary injury do slow work. The eye refuses to catalogue. You show her how to check for protective sensation. A wisp of cotton, a thin filament. She flinches more than he does. Loss of feeling isn't relief, you say. It only means you burn and bleed without warning. It means you learn by smoke and by stain. She nods. She writes that down, as if she'll need to remember it later. She thinks later will be kinder than now. Everyone does, once. In the dressing room, you teach her your ritual: warm water, not hot. Soap, not faith. Dry between the toes, as if the day depended on it, because some days do. You explain why bandage edges must lie flat, why tape mustn't bite, why a foot that feels nothing still complains in other languages, odor, color, swelling, warmth, if you care enough to listen. You show her the claw hand posture in another patient, ulnar nerve palsy, curling fingers like leaves in drought, and how a simple splint prevents a lifetime of unintentional cruelty from the world. She asks timidly whether it's contagious. You answer, without gentleness, but without cruelty. Not easily. Not in the way stories warned her. Close, prolonged contact. Susceptibility. Genetics that play favorites. You point to the open windows, the distance between beds, the breeze that never stops. You point to your own hands chapped, still yours. In the courtyard, a woman with eyebrows in retreat laughs at something the breeze said. The new one laughs too, in relief or imitation, you can't decide. You hand her the ledger. She stares at the column's name, age, lesions, nerve function, ulcers, notes, then at you. What if I get something wrong? You will, you say, and then you'll write it down and do it better. That's the whole art. A bell clangs from the little chapel, whose paint gave up last year. She looks toward it like it might provide an index of answers. You can go, you tell her, or stay. God accepts both, in my experience. What do you do? I count dressings and pretend it's prayer. Later, when she tries to sleep, she'll stare at the palm of her own hand and wait to feel the feather you place there, mere touch, present or not. She'll wait far too long before admitting she can't tell the difference between fear and sensation. Welcome to the island. The curriculum is thorough. You tie on your apron and count your breath in 4, out 6, and step into the ward. The ward is a geography of loss. You learn the map in a week. Along the sunside wall, faces where the mid-bridge collapses inward and the nose reshapes into a soft, eroded hill. Lepromatous lesions bloom along the cheeks, coppery, then nodular, like the skin has been planted with seeds that insist on sprouting. On the shade side, tuberculoid patches, pale, hairless ovals, where sensation has gone missing, as if the body erased itself with a careful rubber. Hold this, you say to a man as you change a bandage, and he smiles and drops the hemostat almost immediately, not clumsy, just numb. Peripheral nerves go first, they told you. Ulnar, median, perineal gone quiet like telegraph wires cut in the night. Fingers curve into claw hand when muscles forget their instructions. Feet lose their arches and open to the ground. Eyes forget to blink and the cornea dries like glass. You test a forearm with a pin, not cruel, clinical. And the man watches your hand like it belongs to someone else. Do you feel this? You ask. He shakes his head. You switch to a wisp of cotton. This. He laughs a soft, irritated sound. I feel you're looking, he says, but not the rest. The smell is its own chapter. Carbolic, sweat, burnt keratin. A sweetness you wish had no name. You mop the floors. You boil the dressings. The next man's feet tell you everything before he speaks. Great toes lost to pressure sores he never felt. Arches collapsed. Skin a parchment glossed with grease. You lift one heel, and the odor rises sweet and iron at once. We'll soak, you say, voice steady, and you lower his feet into tepid water, tinted the color of weak tea. When you cup his ankle, his pulse is a rabbit. When you let go, a sliver of callus drifts like a leaf. He apologizes as if he spilled wine. On a cot near the door, A woman's cheeks carry lepromatous nodules the size of small coins, edges dark like bruised fruit. You clean around each dome with cotton and diluted carbolic. The surface shines, then dulls, then weeps again. Her eyebrows have thinned to ghosts. Her eyelashes have learned not to grow. She holds a mirror with both hands and does not look into it. "Tell me a story," she asks. You give her a market day, saltfish, limes, a boy chasing a hat. She nods as if she remembers. At the wash table, you turn bandages the way sailors turn lines, rinse, wring, boil, lay out. Your fingers learn to measure fever without a thermometer, heat in the breath, a brightness in the eyes that is not joy. A boy no older than 15 keeps rubbing the same patch of forearm where the ulnar nerve should speak nothing. You trace the root of the nerve with a fingertip, a quiet map lesson here, then here, and for a second his mouth softens, as if the idea of sensation could stand in for the thing itself. Eyes come next. Lagophthalmos lids that won't fully close because the seventh nerve has resigned. You teach blink drills like catechism. Close. Hold. Release. Again, until the muscles tremble. You paint liquid paraffin at night, along the lower lid, a slick, fragile shield. In the morning, there's grit at the corners, tiny pearls of dryness. You wipe away with saline and patience. By noon, the ward smells like boiled bandage, sweat, and something faintly metallic that never leaves. You trim a fingernail that has thickened into horn. It snaps into your palm like a chip of shell. You slide a soft leather splint over a hand that's decided to curl, strap it with linen, and watch as the thumb sits up straighter, surprised to be remembered. He thanks you as if you've returned a borrowed book. A man whose face has blurred at the bridge of the nose asks if it will stop. You don't say the word never. You give him the litany you can give cleanliness, rest, food, tincture of Chalmorgra for those who still believe in it, and you say it in the same tone every time, like weather known by sailors. When he laughs, it's small and dry. "And prayer?" he asks. If it helps you sleep, you say, "Tying the bandage neat." He nods. Sleep is a treatment people understand. Outside, salt dries white in the seams of your apron. A gull lands on the sill and stares, grey eye patient as a clerk. You shoo it with a wrist, and it hops twice, unconvinced, then lifts away on indifferent wings. Inside, you mark the ledger with the same 3 columns you've taught yourself to keep clean, fed, less pain, and you allow yourself the treason of a 4th column, private. In the margins, seen. You close the cover with your palm for a beat, then turn back to the ward and the next bed. You say the word contagion, like a prayer that should have been learned earlier. They told you, risk is low if you're careful. The island prefers superstition. It hurts less than meanings you cannot control. A woman sits stiff as a post as you paint iodine and hope onto old wounds. Her eyelids don't quite meet Lagophthalmos, so you teach her to tape them shut to sleep. She laughs at the lesson and tells you she used to be a seamstress. Everything can be closed if you know where the thread goes. At the end of the row is a boy who makes jokes because it's easier than saying he's 16. He taps his chest and declares, "All heart." Then he winks because his nasal bridge is soft and collapsing, and humor keeps it from being the only thing anyone sees. You hand him a cup and he pretends it's champagne. "To the nurses," he says. "Every day, the bravest idiots on the island." You almost tell him you prefer the term professionals. You don't. You drink the water with him and call it even. You chart. You write anesthesia here, ulcer there, resorption where toes have vanished like coins, slipped through a floorboard. You draw tiny maps of lesions for future you to follow. Future you realize, is already tired. Nights teach you the work you didn't learn in school. There's a bin marked clean, and another marked clean enough. Your lamp throws a honey circle on the table as you pick away actinic crust and callus over ulcer, not because it heals, but because it keeps sand and insects from turning a wound into a new country. The patients joke about it spa night, and you pretend along so the room keeps breathing. You can smell when a dressing should have been changed yesterday. The buttery, metallic edge of infection that isn't raging. Raging would be simpler, just persistent. You irrigate with boiled water and a ruthlessness you learned from the sea. If tissue is dead, you take it clean lines, firm hand, and you keep your voice easy enough to hold. Nearly done. A man comes with a plantar ulcer, so deep you can balance a coin in it. He swears he didn't feel the stone that made it. You believe him. You build him a felt offloading donut with the careful pride of a carpenter and threaten to charge for bespoke footwear. He laughs, that scratchy island laugh that is equal parts nicotine and stubbornness, and asks whether bespoke comes in Saints' Day discounts. You tell him saints work on tips, and he promises to pray extravagantly on your behalf. Nerves talk to you in their silence. You palpate the ulnar nerve just proximal to the elbow. It rolls like a rope under too thin skin, thickened, tender, and the patient hisses, not from cutaneous pain, from the neurotropic burn that flickers even when sensation elsewhere has clocked out. You make a note, neuritis flare, maybe a little rest, maybe a splint. He nods like you've said something wise. He would nod if you said the moon's a lemon. He wants a plan more than a miracle. Between patients, you lean against the doorway and listen to water slap the pier. Somewhere, a guitar tries to remember a hymn. Somewhere farther, the jungle chews its own secrets. You think about infection, the way a poet might think about rhyme, the ways it returns, the sly paths it takes. You started this as a nurse with steady hands. You are becoming a custodian of thresholds this side of pain, that side of sensation, somewhere in between where people live anyway. At 2 a.m., the boy with the jokes comes for his eyes. You show him again how to bring the lower lid up with a strip of gauze, how to seal the blink his nerves no longer deliver. He claims the look makes him mysterious. Women love a man with advanced eyelid technology. You train your face not to break. He trains his not to either. Between you, mystery survives the hour. Days write themselves in loops. You clean, you feed, you listen. You teach the rituals that keep damage from finishing what disease began. Check your feet each night. Mirror, lamp, patience. Trim your nails square, never tear. Pad the shoes you do have, never go barefoot. However, the beach calls your name. You say it so often you start to hear it in your sleep. You wake with a sentence still in your mouth. No new wounds tonight. Good. Hold that. The island accepts your bargain without promising anything back. Weather keeps its own chart. The dry season is full of honest sun and small deceptions. People believe in improvement because the light is flattering. The wet season tells you the truth. Roofs go from leaky to lyrical, 1,000 steady taps that make speech optional. Sheets stay damp. Linen molds if you look at it wrong. The ulcers do what ulcers do in wet heat. They widen, macerate, gnaw. The rains come sideways, like an argument you can't walk away from. Gutters fail their brief careers. The roof, patched in 7 different dialects of tin and prayer, speaks fluent percussion. Water finds its level, which turns out to be ankle height in the dressing room and thigh in the courtyard. You move the pallets up onto bricks. The bricks sink with a sigh that could be yours. Bandages float like reluctant lilies. You chase gauze with a broom and discover the ward shares a small, entrepreneurial population of rats who believe you are redecorating for their convenience. The new one learns a useful lesson about shrieking and how it startles the very patients you insist should rest. You apologize for the rats on behalf of a universe that won't. In the low room where you keep herbs that like to pretend they are medicine, the bundles have wicked opinions about humidity. Mold writes its signature on anything it finds. You bin half of it, grind the other half, and tell yourself the bitter taste denotes potency. You tell jokes to the mortar, you'll outlive us all, won't you? And the mortar refuses comment. Feet are your enemy in flood season. You set out basins and insist on inspection soles, interdigital spaces, the fragile bridge where a blister becomes a story. Without sensation, a pebble is a sermon, long, repetitive, and likely to leave a mark. You dry everything as if dryness were currency and you were suddenly wealthy. It never lasts. The rain drums until thought goes dull. At night, you boil instruments in a pot that used to be good enough for rice. Steam ghosts the windows. The new one, hair tied up and out of patience, holds a lantern until her arm trembles. You trade her the lantern for a cup and teach her how to take a pulse in the throat when the wrist lies. She grins at the trick like a thief who's found a better lockpick. You're doing well, you say, and mean it. I still hate the rats, she says, and means it more. The flood retreats like gossip slowly, leaving behind a residue of truth and other things. You scrape mud from thresholds, ring sheets, unroll mattresses like flags after a war without victory. The patients sleep with their feet propped on folded blankets, and for once the island smells more of wet earth than of the human catalogue. You stand in the doorway, damp to the ankles, and accept a brief moment of silence that doesn't ask for anything back. You take it. You always take it when it's offered. You learn how to dry a wound with patience and salt and the sharp little wind you make with folded paper when the lamp misbehaves. It starts like weather quietly, in corners. A cough too deep for the body that carries it. A fever that sits on the chest and refuses to leave. You tell yourself it's just the season, just the air, just bad tea. Then 2 more cough, then 5. Then the new one loses her appetite, and you pretend not to notice that she pretends. You line the cot edges with bowls and boiled water and the last of the quinine, though quinine is not the right hymn for this particular service. You teach a rhythm: sip, breathe, rest like a waltz. No one wants to dance. You separate the worst cases behind a screen you built from sheet and wire. Screens placate fear more than they stop droplets. Sometimes placating fear is half the job. One man declines fast crackles at the bases, lips bluing where oxygen should have made a home. When he exhales, the air sounds like paper being folded by hands that are tired of the motion. You prop him upright. Gravity is your oldest colleague. He grips your wrist with fingers that have forgotten callus and still remembers pressure. You count breaths under your own breath, as if reducing them might quiet the numbers down. I'm sorry, you tell him, because it's not leprosy, isn't the comfort civilians imagine it to be. He smiles anyway, because he knows you said, I won't leave. You don't. You sit and time spoons of water with the metronome of his chest. The new one watches, memorizes. The priest comes and waits by the door. You nod him forward. Words don't change the outcome, but sometimes they change the way the living carry it. By nightfall, the fever has its small parade, 3 cots, damp cloths, a wash basin that looks like surrender when it's only zinc and dents. You mark temperatures in the ledger that isn't meant for this. You add a column titled, "Simply Today because the future will not audit you kindly." What breaks you isn't death, though it tries. It's the arithmetic of care. 3 of you, dozens of them, buckets to carry, sheets to change, mouths to wet, and the way a body in delirium calls for a mother who stands 5 islands away and 40 years in the ground. You fetch a clean cloth anyway. You wring it out and whisper that she hears. When it passes the worst of it, you watch survivors sleep like boats finally taken off a shoal. Your hands shake with the adrenaline that only asks for payment after the fact. The new one sits beside you on the steps and mutters half joke, half prayer. "Is this on the training syllabus?" "Yes," you say. "It's published under whatever happens next." You both laugh, but softly, the way you laugh in churches and in rooms where someone just remembered the name of their own child after a long year without it. Supplies were a memory last month. This month, they're a rumor. You trade favors with the fishermen who skirt the island at dusk and won't land. You lower a clothesline basket with letters and coins and bring up onions, a parcel of gauze, a note that says God keep you in a handwriting that doesn't know you. You read it twice anyway. People thin out like handwriting at the bottom of a page. Some fail quietly, collarbones and wrists, writing sentences you don't want to translate. Some go with small rallies, appetite for a day, laughter for an afternoon, then a breath that misses its next appointment. You keep a list of names and a list of crosses to paint when the rain lets you. The lists are different lengths, and you hate that about them. The graveyard softens until a spade is an opinion, not a tool. The men dig with boards and the backs of shovels. The gravedigger hums the same 2 notes so softly, you start to think he's a machine built to survive anything. You would borrow some of his design if you could. The boy with the jokes catches a fever that isn't this disease at all, malaria, or dysentery, or a raft of letters that don't stop it either. He tries one last line, "Tell the ladies I died handsome." And you say you did, because mercy sometimes sounds like agreement. Later, you wash his hair, because the living will see him, and you want them to think tenderness survived the rain. You start writing to yourself, because letters home feel like smuggling grief through customs. In your little book, you list facts like a prosecutor: loss of pain, then loss of fingers, loss of blink, then loss of sight, loss of smell, then loss of appetite, loss of fear. That last one surprises you because after a while, everyone has handled everything bloody or broken that a person can handle. There is nothing left to startle. You decide that absence of surprise is its own kind of fever, and you try to keep yours low. Once a month, the priest comes and the island stands up straighter, as if God were a magistrate with a ledger. He finds you in the corridor, collar limp from weather and duty. He carries a small tin of something that might be ointment or might be hope. Both come labeled incorrectly here. "I meant to bring more," he says, opening the tin as if to prove intent. The shipment failed to arrive. The sea had other work. "So did we," you answer, and let the wry edge in, because it keeps you from letting the sharper one out. He watches you rewrap an elbow contracture with the economy of someone who learned to measure pity in inches of gauze. When you tie the final knot, he clears his throat. "Do you ever," he starts, then starts again. Do you ever worry you've made a bargain with despair? Daily, you say. But despair has poor credit. I prefer cash transactions, clean wounds, full bellies, 10 minutes of sleep. He laughs unexpected, a cracked bell that still rings. He tells you a story about a boy who used to ring the chapel bell off time, just to see who would come running angry and who would come running worried. You ask which he was. Angry, he admits, then worried, then tired. Like everyone else, you sit on the step outside where the air moves. He asks if you pray. You tell him truthfully that you do, but your liturgy is irregular sterile water, sharp scissors, a hand kept steady because someone else is watching it shake. He nods as if that matches something in his own private dictionary. If God is taking attendance, you add, mark me working overtime. He already has, he says, and for once, you let a soft thing land without interrogating it. You ask him if he ever wrote down the names of all who left, all who died, all who might be alive somewhere else, and simply forgot to send a letter. He says he tried. The pages got wet. The ink ran. He started again. He keeps starting again. That's the job, you say. Starting again with less. You go back in before the mosquitoes decide they've been polite long enough. The priest returns to his tin. You to your ledger. Both of you write in different dialects of the same need to make proof that someone was here and mattered, even if the sea declines to carry that proof anywhere. He hears confessions that don't need hearing and gives absolution because it's the only currency that still spends. You do not confess. You keep your sins like tools handled often, wiped clean, ready. Sometimes you walk to the far bluff where the trade winds unspool the heat and let the world be large again. From there, the channel is a sheet of hammered metal, bright and stubborn, and Trinidad is a rumor of roofs. You sit on coral and let your spine remember it belongs to you. A lizard does the same 5 push-ups it does every evening on the same warm rock. And you decide routine is a kind of faith. In the end. There isn't an ending, just a day when you realize the ward has been quiet too long. You scrub a basin no one will use. You fold a sheet that won't be unfolded. You walk the corridor, and the light has the quality of forgiveness. Except you don't believe in that word anymore. Not here. Not where ignorance, distance, and a cheap ledger did most of the killing. A boat noses the channel like it's tasting fear. The boat comes when the mangoes turn overripe and fall with soft thuds that sound like punctuation. Men you don't know lift crates you didn't ask for. Someone shakes your hand as if she has delivered a miracle and not 3 tins of carbolic and a stack of forms. You inventory gratitude by habit, then learn the forms are for counting what was lost. You walk the ward with a ledger that suddenly belongs to other people. They ask about numbers, and you give them names. They want outcomes, and you give them stories, ulcers that closed because a sandal was finally worn, a woman who learned to check her foot with a mirror, a man who laughed once, out loud and startled himself enough to do it again. The new one stands straighter now. She doesn't flinch at the clawed hands, the leonine faces, the collapsed bridge of a nose. She greets a face first and a set of findings second. You watch her correct a bandage you would have corrected yourself. The correction is gentle. You feel unnecessary for 3 seconds and let the feeling be a reward instead of a wound. They ask if you will go back with the boat shore leave, a bed that doesn't mildew from the inside. You say no, because stubbornness is an organ now. They ask if you will go back eventually. You shrug. Eventually is the name you give to anything that refuses to schedule you. At dusk, you walk down to the edge of the water and wash your hands for too long. The tide lifts and drops a tangle of seaweed around your ankles, like the island is pretending to be affectionate. You apologize to it for what? You're not sure. For staying, for leaving one day, for both. Behind you, laughter quiet, real. Someone tells a joke about the rats. The punchline is that they're indestructible, so obviously they're management. You add it to your meager store of useful humor. Tomorrow, you'll tell it to someone who needs it. You sign the forms. You hand the ledger to the one person who can read your handwriting on the first try. You promise to return it when the copies come back. Copies never come back. You find a blank notebook and begin again. Name, age, sensation, ulcer, notes. There is a line after notes where you sometimes write still here. You underline it twice in your own entry, then cross it out because bureaucracy is allergic to confession. You close the book. You set it on the table like a small stubborn altar, something that will remember even if no one else does. You survived another season, the priest says, appearing in the doorway with the talent only priests and cats have. In the bureaucratic sense, you say. The rest remains under review. He laughs. You do too, but softly, because night is coming on and the ward prefers quiet after the bells. You check the dressings one last time. You turn the lantern wick down until the flame is a calm, round coin. You listen to breathing that belongs to the living. You count each breath as if it owed you rent, and for once, everyone paid on time. Tomorrow, there will be more work. Tomorrow, there will be less gauze than you wished for, and more courage than you expected. Tomorrow, you'll start the list again. You already know the first line. Still here. And for this place, for now, that's the only metric that matters. You stand on the dock with your case and your hands that don't shake until you notice they do. The men on board try not to look at your face the way people here tried not to look at each other's. You could shout, "I'm clean," as if that were the point. Instead, you say nothing and let the island finish speaking through you. You will leave with names you can't say out loud without breaking something in your chest. You will carry the smell on your clothes for weeks, phenol, sea, and the stubborn ghost of sweetness. And it will pull you back at inconvenient times. Church, market, the bright chatter of a cafe. You will learn that isolation lingers even in crowds. If you're still here listening, tell me where you are and what the clock says. If the story kept you awake, you weren't alone. Like, comment, subscribe. Not for numbers, for memory. Some places only exist if someone is stubborn enough to say they did. Now breathe. Your journey is now complete.